The above framework, which is about the text-driven approach, is best used flexibly. There's no need to follow all the stages in the framework. So, depending on your own teaching and learning context, you can just delete some stages or combine some stages, or sometimes you can also add your own particular stages or some activities. These are some examples from our textbook, and if you have time, you can read it through and refer to organize your own classroom lessons. Yeah, let's pass through and let's look at some other framework for developing material. The first one is task-based language teaching approach, which is very famous because it is the precise realization of communicative language teaching. However, TBLT has not been made use of in course books, while it has been very emphasized as a desirable pedagogy in ELT classrooms. Instead, PPP, which is a very traditional approach for teaching language, still prevails in course books. The course book develops their activities and the content. Firstly, providing a predetermined focused language point and present rules, descriptions, and examples of the teaching point. So this stage can be named as presentation. The PPP, the first P of the PPP is presentation. The second one is practice, and the last one is production. So at the beginning, most course books present the rules, the descriptions, or examples of the teaching point. It is the same in the language classroom, which is mostly based on the traditional principle. Secondly, providing focused practice activities. So this means that having students drill or practice some given expressions or words at the beginning. So in this second stage, students can participate in unorganized or some short or very structured activities like speaking or simple dialogue practice. And finally, the activities of production is about production of language forms connected to the teaching point. So in this stage, the students can reorganize or sometimes a little bit transform the structure of their practices stages. So they can produce a little bit different part of their own language. I mean, for example, after they practice some short dialogue in pairs or in groups, then they reorganize the dialogue by filling some blanks with their own stories or ideas, some experiences. So in this stage of production, students can add a little bit about their flexibilities. So this is the general process of material development presentation. I mean, the course books usually follow these processes of PPP. Firstly, they present the rules or the grammatical structures or some new words at the beginning, and then they lead the students practice the given structures and expression of words, and then finally they also let the students produce some creative or flexible answers. And this traditional approach is generally applied in teaching English in classrooms. So many teachers also follow these processes. So, however, TBLT quite recently has been the norm or a prevalent pedagogy as the realization of communicative language teaching. So TBLT involves students in pulling and making communicative use of their existing linguistic resources to complete a non-linguistic task such as inventing a new board game. Any explicit focus on language form occurs informally during completion of task or formally when reflecting on the effectiveness of the task completion. These days, usually the focus on form stage occurs when reflecting on the completing the task stage. So by wrapping up the task activities, the teacher explains the grammatical structures to the students at the end of the lesson and have the students solve some related questionnaires. Focus is on meaning rather than form. Their goal is successful task completion. So students acquire language strategies, learning strategies, and communication skills from their experience of performing the task. So sometimes the teachers can have their students learn about the principles of language learning strategies or communication skills at the beginning of the lesson, that is the before starting to do their tasks. The task examples are like organizing and conducting a meeting about a class outing or ordering books online for the class library, inventing a device to save water. So these kinds of pedagogic tasks which can be realized in the classroom resemble the real life tasks. So by performing these kinds of pedagogical tasks, which is a little bit reshaped to be performed in the classroom, the students can be prepared to use their English language outside of their language classrooms. There is two versions of the TBLT. The strong version focus on task performance with teachers as a language resources plus reflection on students' useful language after task completion. The weak version, a preparation stage which includes teaching of language to be useful during task performance. I think usually the weak version can effectively applied in Korea as well as some other EFL countries, because the students need to learn about some language expressions or new words in the beginning of the lesson, and after that they can practice what they have learned while they performing their tasks. And plus, the reflect on students' usual language after task completion also can be added here. So usually in weaker version, the teacher suggested the expressions or structures or words, new words that the students can use at the beginning of the lesson. And while completing the tasks, the students use the expressions. And after the task completion, the teacher reflect on the students' use of the language and explain some specific grammatical things and have students practice some grammar application through solving some grammar questions. Look at this. TBLT has been weakened into a form-focused approach, in which tasks are selected to practice particular language items or features, which are pre-taught before the task introduced. This approach is similar to the weak version. So the initial stage is that the teachers can do to perform the TBLT is to identify what language items to be taught through the task completion activity. So by targeting the language features at the beginning, and then the teacher can organize some classroom tasks that requires the use of the particular language items. This method is common in countries and institutions which prioritize language-focused exams, and in Korea as well. Let's pass this. The text-driven task-based approach is the combination of the text-driven approach and task-based approach. And let's see the next one, the problem-solving approaches. PBL, problem-based learning, is gaining popularity with the teachers and students. It is the same here in Korea. So especially in universities, many programs adopt PBL as an innovative pedagogy these days. The basic procedure of PBL can be summarized in 4 stages. By starting about the PBL and its effectiveness in enhancing students' self-directedness, I summarize the processes into 4 stages. One is problem definition. In this stage, students try to figure out what their given problem want the students to do. So they try to analyze the problem. They try to comprehend the problem. They try to specify what they have to do during the problem-solving processes. And then in the second stage of strategy design, they try to share their existing knowledge and information and also search for new information and knowledge by reading books or magazines or some materials or searching for something through the internet. And then they design a strategy to solve their problems through discussions and meeting negotiations. And the third stage is strategy implementation. In this stage, they can apply what they have designed into real problem solving. And then they evaluate or assess the outcomes of their strategy implementation. In this stage, they compare the outcomes or what they have observed to their established problem-solving goals. Then, if they recognize that the goals and the outcomes are very well matched, their problem-solving is successful. And when they are not matched, they regard their solving to failed. Then they try to review the previous stages and sometimes modify their strategy and implement the modified strategy again, and the processes circulate. Let's come back here. Students are set a problem and their task goal is to solve it. Sometimes teachers give a whole completed problem, but sometimes students themselves can organize their problem just based on the guidelines given by the teacher. A student-led, inquiry-based, and self-reflective approach. So in PBL, teacher authority decrease and learner power or agency autonomy increase. The PBL originally was born in engineering faculty, so the PBL approach is very useful for teaching engineering or EAP, English teaching for academic purposes, or sometimes for teaching some vocational things. On experiential approach, this is a very experienced approach. Facilitate the engagement, the significance, the relevance, achievable challenge, and outcome-focused communication. Let's look at the examples of PBL. For example, developing a solution to the problem. So coming up with a water shortage, or coming up with a proposal for introducing salmon fishing in Oman, etc. Depending on the student's level, you can also organize very simple but very interesting problems or issues depending on your students' levels. The next one is CBI or CBL, Content and Language Integrated Learning. It can be called CLIL or CBI, content-based instruction. Students are taught a subject, topic, or skill through the medium of a language. So the teacher aims to teach the students the content and the language simultaneously. But while they learn about the subject, they do not focus on the linguistic structures of the language. They usually focus on the content or the subject topic more, with the objective of increasing content knowledge, related skills, and the language acquisition and the communicative competence. For teaching English in higher education, especially in liberal arts, most of the courses are based on this aim. While teaching about environment or transportation or culture, the lecturers usually teach about the content itself, but through the medium of a language. So the lecturers in universities do not too much focus on teaching the linguistic aspects, but they expect that while the students are focusing on learning the content, they can recognize the linguistic structures at the same time. But of course, when we teach some lower level students in higher education or in secondary or elementary, the teacher's explicit explanation about the linguistic aspects is necessary. It can stimulate effective and cognitive engagement if the content or the subject or the topic is especially related to the student's interest. The last one is project-based approach. This can be abbreviated as a PJBL. Some research use this one as a PBL. In that case, the PJBL can be very confused with the concept of the PBL, this one. But they are a little bit different. Project-based approach usually are targeted in the activities that can be performed outside the classroom. The students gain many opportunities for both implicit and explicit learning when reading background information, viewing video, planning their research, devising questionnaires, recording and analyzing their data, writing reports, and giving oral presentations or complete their project. Sometimes the students can go outside the school, so they can interview some persons to gather the real data, or they can sometimes get some new materials to make their own subject or some stuff. I think there is something wrong here. This part is strange, I think. Actually, the PBL started in medical education, and PJBL started in the engineering faculty. I think the writer has some confused idea, so let's change. Okay. All right. Next time we'll learn about the language teaching materials for young and very young learners. Let's see you on Wednesday.